Welcome back to Math 103. This is the 9th video on voting. The purpose of this video is just to work through the solutions to the problem at the end of the last video. That was about the campus talent show in which Ashley, Mark, Rachel, and Tom were competing. This is a non-political example of an election. Each of the 4 students will perform their talent in front of an audience, and once the performers are finished, the audience members will rank each participant in order of preference. The winner will move on to the national competition. The resulting preference table is shown below, and the task is, for each of the 4 voting methods we have discussed, determine which student wins the competition. Also determine if any of these election results violate one or both of the fairness criteria we have discussed. The plurality method is easiest of all. All we have to do is look at the first choice votes. In other words, all subsequent rows of the table from the second choice row on don't matter. All that does matter is which candidate has a plurality of first choice votes, and that is Ashley. So Ashley, denoted here by A, is the winner of the election. Notice that with any of these voting methods, including this one, all the work that we have done to determine the winner, namely looking just in this case at the first choice votes, also determines the overall ranking of the candidates under the extended plurality method. In other words, Ashley has the most first choice votes, more than any opponent. Mark has the second most, Rachel has the third most, and Tom has the fourth most. This means that the overall ranking based on the extended plurality method is Ashley in first place, then Mark, then Rachel, then Tom. On to the instant runoff voting method. Who is the winner here? Well, we ask, as always, is there a majority candidate? There is not. In particular, there are 11 plus 10 plus 8 plus 6 votes cast. That's 35 votes total. That means that at least 18 first choice votes are needed for a majority. No candidate has 18 or more first choice votes, so what we do, we eliminate the candidate with fewest first choice votes, and that is Tom. That means that wherever Tom appears on anyone's ballot, he is eliminated, and everyone else, everyone who appears below Tom on any ballot, subsequently moves up one position. Okay. So in the resulting preference table in the second round, now these 6 voters are casting their first choice votes for Rachel. So we ask in the second round, is there a candidate who has 18 or more first choice votes? Well, Ashley has 11 still, Mark still has 10, Rachel now has these 14 first choice votes, still not 18, so the election is still not over. What do? We again eliminate the candidate who has fewest first choice votes, and that is now Mark. So Mark is crossed out wherever he appears, and the whole election now comes down to Ashley versus Rachel. And notice that these votes for Rachel move her up to first choice, and these votes right here for Rachel are first choice votes now. Ashley still has only 11 first choice votes. Rachel now has these 10, plus these 8, plus these 6. That's 24, which means that in the end, Rachel wins the election. Now notice the order of elimination. First we eliminated Tom, then we eliminated Mark, and then in some sense we eliminated Ashley. She lost that final round, and only Rachel is left. Then tell us about the overall ranking of candidates. Well, Rachel is first, Ashley is runner-up, Mark is next, and Tom is last. Tom is in last place in the overall ranking because he was the first one to be eliminated. There is a certain thought process, according to this method, which makes Rachel the winner. That same thought process puts Tom in last place overall. We move on to the board account method and ask, now who's the winner? We have 4 candidates now. That means that a first choice vote is now worth 4 points. A last choice vote is always worth 1 point, second to last 2 points, third to last 3 points, fourth to last is worth 4 points. All right, so let's see how this works out. I'm going to write this out slightly differently than in the video in which we first discussed the board account method. In particular, I'm now going to go just ballot, or rather column by column, rather than first choice, then second choice, then third choice, then fourth choice. You'll see in a moment what I mean by that. So Ashley receives how many points? On the first group of ballots, she is receiving 4 points each times 11 ballots. On the second group of ballots, of which there are 10, she receives only 1 point each times 10 ballots. Then in the third group of preference ballots, she is again receiving only 1 point each times 8 ballots. And finally, in the last group of 6 preference ballots, she is again receiving only 1 point per ballot times 6 ballots, for a total of 68 points. Now Mark receives 2 points on each of the first 11 ballots, plus 4 points on each of the next 10 ballots, plus 3 points on each of the next 8 ballots, plus 2 points on each of the last 6 ballots, for a total of 98 points. So he is way ahead of Ashley. We move on to find that Rachel receives 1 point on each of 11 ballots, then 2 points on each of the next 10 ballots, plus 4 points on each of the next 8 ballots, plus 3 points on each of the remaining 6 ballots, for a total of 81 points, so she will not be the winner. Mark is still in first place. Finally, we compute that Tom receives 3 points on each of the first 11 ballots, 3 points again on each of the next 10 ballots, then 2 points on each of the next 8 ballots, and finally 4 points on each of the remaining 6 ballots, for 103 points total, so Tom is the winner. Very well, that Tom is the winner under the board account. Notice that we've had 3 different voting methods applied now to this election, and we've had a different winner for each one. Tom is the winner under the board account method, but we found that Ashley was the winner under the plurality method, and Rachel is the winner under instant runoff voting. Before we go on, let's make sure that we've actually done this correctly. Let's check our work in the way indicated in an earlier video clip. We noted that the total number of points here can be checked. So the total, if you add up the 68 points plus 98 plus 81 plus 103, those add up to 350 points total. Now, how do we check that? Recall that each ballot gives out a certain number of points, and there are 35 total ballots. So let's see if that adds up correctly. So each ballot contains 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1 equals 10 points per ballot. Okay. And so 10 points times 35 ballots does indeed equal 350 total points. Okay, good. So this matches up. The total number of points that we've computed candidate by candidate and the total number of points that we can reason out must have been given on all the ballots combined. Great. So that's good evidence that we have done this correctly. Finally, let's note that if we look at the individual point totals as we've computed them, they give a natural way to give an overall ranking of the candidates. So Tom is in first place overall, Mark is the runner-up overall, Rachel is in third place overall, and Ashley is in fourth place overall. So this is the extended board account method, the overall ranking, and that's Tom, Mark, Rachel, and then Ashley. Finally, we consider the method of pairwise comparisons and see who wins under that method. This is where we have to write down all the individual head-to-head competitions and award 1 point for each victory and half a point for each tie. First, the list of the individual head-to-head competitions that we'll have to consider. Ashley versus Mark, Ashley versus Rachel, Ashley versus Tom. Now we proceed to Mark versus somebody. Notice that we've already considered Mark versus Ashley. Mark versus Ashley and Ashley versus Mark are not two separate head-to-head competitions. They are one and the same head-to-head competition, so we only write that once. So next is Mark versus Rachel, then Mark versus Tom, and finally, Rachel versus Tom. In the head-to-head competition between Ashley and Mark, Ashley is ahead of Mark on these 11 ballots, whereas Mark is ahead of Ashley on 10 plus another 8 plus another 6 is 24 ballots, which means that Mark wins this head-to-head competition by a score of 24 to 11. There are 24 voters who put Mark higher than Ashley, whereas there are only 11 voters who put Ashley higher than Mark on their ballots. Next, Ashley versus Rachel. It'll be a similar sort of thing. 11 ballots on which Ashley is ahead of Rachel, but on the remaining 24 ballots, Rachel is ahead of Ashley. So again, Rachel wins by a score of 24 to 11, and it'll be exactly the same thing when we consider Ashley versus Tom. Tom wins by a score of 24 to 11. It's the same 11 ballots that have Ashley higher than Tom, but all the rest of the ballots have Tom higher than Ashley. Very well. We move on to Mark versus Rachel. Now it's less obvious how the rest of this election is going to go. Mark versus Rachel. Mark is ahead of Rachel on 21 ballots. Rachel is ahead of Mark on only 14. So Mark wins by a score of 21 to 14. Next, Mark versus Tom. Tom is ahead here on 11 ballots and also on these 6 ballots. So Tom has a total of 17 voters ranking him higher, but Mark has 18 voters ranking him higher than Tom. Therefore, Mark barely wins this head-to-head competition by a score of 18 to 17, but he wins. And so he gets 1 full point for that win. Okay. And finally, we have Rachel versus Tom, and that tells us, and we see there that Tom is ahead on these 11 ballots. He is also ahead on these 10 ballots, and he's also ahead on these 6 ballots. So that is quite an overwhelming number. So Tom wins, and this is by a score of 27 to 8. Very well. So we find that Mark has 1 point from this victory over Ashley, 1 point from this victory over Rachel, and 1 point from this victory over Tom, and therefore we find that Mark wins the election. In fact, since he has won every single head-to-head competition against his opponents, he has actually defeated, not tied anyone, but outright defeated each of his opponents head-to-head. We find that Mark is a Condorcet candidate. Okay. So there is no guarantee that there will be a Condorcet candidate in an election, but if there is one, such a candidate is guaranteed to win under the method of pairwise comparisons. As for the overall ranking, we see that not only has Mark received the greatest number of points, 3 points, 1 for each victory, but Tom has received the second most points. So Mark has 3 points. Tom has 2 points from his 2 victories. Then Rachel has 1 point from her victory over Ashley. And finally, Ashley has 0 points because she did not win any of her head-to-head competitions. So Ashley comes in 4th overall with 0 points. Now that we're done finding the winners under the various methods that we've considered thus far in the course, we can ask, have there been any violations here of either the majority criterion or the Condorcet criterion? As for the majority criterion, there are no violations by any of our election results. We actually knew that this would be the case in advance because there is no majority candidate in the first place. No majority candidate in the first place, then there is no danger that the wrong candidate will win the election because from the point of view of the majority criterion, there is no right candidate. As for the Condorcet criterion, we do have a Condorcet candidate in this election, namely Mark. Now, he was the winner under the method of pairwise comparisons, as of course he would have to be, but all the other voting methods declared someone other than Mark to be the winner. Plurality, instant runoff voting, and board account methods all violate the Condorcet criterion in this particular election. They don't produce such violations all the time, but in this election they do. So from Condorcet's point of view, all those other three methods have produced results that are unfair.